So now that we've taken a look at these beautiful buds, let's talk a little bit about the steps you have to take to make sure we got there.
Okay. There's a lot involved in that. We're actually here today to talk about yield and pest control. They seem like two separate things, but they're actually very intertwined. They go together. But you know, one area helps the other area. As you know, everything I do is organic. I won't put a commercial pesticide on a product that we're going to consume. I would put a poison into it. And just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not poison. Okay, so there's two sides to that. There's the pure organics that don't involve any toxins, and there's organics that involve some toxins, but they're organic in nature and they break down and biodegrade very quickly. And how they interact is a key to how we get to a good yield. Okay, so you can see all the products here.
There's a lot of them.
And I could cover the table with the products that you can use to control pests on your produce. But we've got a few here, the ones that I use. Okay, we're looking at ancient humate, which is humic acid. Has nothing to do with it. It's not a pesticide. It has nothing to do with pest control directly. We have nature's tea. We have sea kill. We have mycorrhizae. And then we have neem oil. And you can see this bottle's been around for a while. Yeah. I bought this bottle 14 months ago. Wow. Haven't used the whole bottle yet. And we have azithrol, which is similar to neem oil, except that it's a more concentrated form. Okay. Azithrol is an extract of neem oil. It concentrates it down to it's super potent. This is about $30 a bottle. It's about $60 a bottle. So if you're at the point that you're using azithrol, it's because you already have insects and you did something wrong. So if you grow your product correctly, you'll have very little effort in pest control. Generally what I do when I put the plants into the flower room, I will, as a precaution, spray them with the neem oil. You mix this with ordinary Palmolive dish soap.
Really?
Palmolive dish soap should be on the table. It's actually, Palmolive dish soap is a pest deterrent in and of itself, but you mix that with the neem oil. What the dish soap does is acts as an emulsifier and breaks the oil down to where the plants can absorb it. And this biodegrades within 4 days. Within 4 days, it's completely inert. No longer has any ingredient in the plant. So what I'll do when I put the plants into the flower room is I'll spray them first day in the flower room with this. I'll spray them again 3 or 4 days later. And that's it. 2 sprays. It's the only time I spray my plants, unless I see an active infestation. And if I see an active infestation, I've done something wrong. Because my first line of defense is over here.
Right.
My first line of defense is the same product that increases yield. Right here. Compost tea. This one's made by Nature Solution. You can make your own compost tea. This product's fairly expensive. This box costs about 20 bucks. It only makes, I don't know, a couple gallons, 2.5 gallons. Wow. Okay? But you can make your own compost tea by making your own compost, and we'll have instructions on how to do that in our follow-up guide. And there's also companies that make commercial compost that you can use to make compost tea. Why this is so important is that it contains a lot of the microbes that break down the nutrients in a form that the plants can utilize, so they're not fighting against the salts that are in the commercial fertilizers. It also contains nematodes.
What are those?
Nematodes are little itty-bitty little worms. I don't know if they're worms, but they look like worms. And they're microscopic in size. You have to have a good magnifying glass to see them. But they'll devour any kind of bug out there.
Oh, wow. So
you want to spray it on the leaves, underneath especially, because underneath the leaves is where you get your spider mites and your thrips and other things. And you also want to feed the plants with this. Okay. Because it creates a culture in the potting medium that fights that. Those little itty-bitty microscopic pests can actually kill a caterpillar that long.
Wow. Because
the caterpillar ingests the nematodes and they eat the caterpillar from the inside out.
Gosh.
So the moral of the story is if you have a healthy plant, your first line of defense is to have a healthy plant. The plant has its natural mechanisms to defend against pests. So first and foremost, and I think I've said this before, is that you don't want to feed your plants a nutrient watering on every watering. You want to measure your runoff or do a soil test. If your soil test is between 835 and 1050, that's good. If your runoff, the runoff can be a little hotter, depending on whether you just fed it a nutrient solution or you just fed it a flush. Generally, I test my runoff when I flush the plants. And when I flush the plants, I give it straight RO water with a little carbohydrate additive. So the base parts per million are about 100. And if what I'm measuring comes off it's 1600, then that's a good flush. It's ready for nutrients the next time. If I'm doing an actual soil test, if it's between 800 and 1000 or 1100, it's good for nutrient the next week feeding. If it's over 2000 parts per million, you've got salt in your soil and your plants are not going to be healthy.
So how do you get rid of that?
Flushing is the way. You've got to give it another watering, and you may alter your watering cycles. I know people that water their plants one nutrient feeding and then the next feeding is a flush or a plain water feeding, and the next feeding, personally myself, I do nutrient feeding and a nutrient feeding and the third one's a flush. But sometimes it builds up because the plants can't use all those nutrients. And what those nutrients do, they're all salts. Potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, iron, they're all salts. And you can see the salts. When you flush them out of the pot, you can see them on the floor. You'll see a big salt line at the bottom of the floor. That's good for them to be on the floor. But if you see salts around the rim of your pot, inside your pot, then you've got problems. Because what happens is the plant gets salt lockout. If there's too much salt in it, the plant can't absorb the nutrients. So what it does is it soaks up and absorbs more water than it normally would have in order to get the nutrients. So what you end up with is a soft, mushy plant that the mites and the bugs can devour very easily. If you have a very healthy plant, it's tough, it's hard to chew, they move on to something that's easier. They go to the place next door. So your first line of defense is your Nature's Tea. I also use humic acid and mycorrhizate. All three of those products provide beneficial microbes to your medium. Whether it's soil, whether it's clay, whether it's cocoa, it doesn't matter. You want a very viable micropopulation, and you want to have your nematodes in there. Now, if you get to the point where you actually see an infestation, where you see spider mites, or you see thrips, or you see fungus gnats, then you have to do something a little bit further.
So you can actually see it with your eyes.
You can.
What do you look out for?